The vastness of space had always been a cold and unforgiving place. The stars seemed so distant, their light fading into the dark emptiness. For most of the galaxy, this void was the backdrop of everyday life. But for the Trevani, it was something much more dangerous. Once their civilization had thrived, with sprawling cities on their lush homeworld, peaceful alliances with neighboring species, and a promising future. Now, all of it was gone. The HFY Dominion, a ruthless and war-hungry empire, had declared war on them without reason. Their fleets poured in from every direction, surrounding the Trevani homeworld, and blockading any chance of escape. The Trevani had turned to their allies, but one by one, they had abandoned them. The Galactic Council, a body of powerful races that was supposed to protect the weak, had closed their eyes to the Trevani's plight. Not one fleet came to answer their distress signals. The Trevani were alone. In the heart of the HFY invasion, a lone ship broke through the darkness. The Vanguard, an old Earth ship, had been responding to a faint distress signal, a signal that had not gone unnoticed. It was a call for help, but not from the powerful or the rich. No, this was a call from those who had been forgotten, from a race on the edge of extinction. The captain of the Vanguard, Elias Voss, was no stranger to battle, a man of few words and a warrior's heart. He had seen war and destruction during humanity's own dark times. But this was different. The Trevani were not an aggressive species. They were not conquerors or marauders. They were peaceful, gentle beings who had only ever sought to help others. The thought of them being wiped out, abandoned by the galaxy, stirred something deep in Elias's chest. He couldn't just stand by and let it happen. Set course for the Trevani homeworld, Elias ordered, his voice steady but filled with urgency. His crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and young recruits, all nodded silently. They knew the risks. The HFY were formidable enemies, and there was no guarantee they would survive this mission. But there was no question in Elias's mind. Humanity would not turn its back on those who needed them. As the Vanguard hurtled toward the heart of the Trevani system, the crew worked quickly. Commander Sienna Graves, Elias's right-hand officer, organized a strategy meeting with the Trevani leaders. The human ship had only a handful of fighters and one warship. It wasn't nearly enough to take on the HFY fleet. But humanity had a unique strength. They had never been the strongest, but they were always the most determined. Sienna's voice was calm, but her words were sharp. We don't have much time. The HFY are surrounding the planet, and we can't break through their blockade with brute force. We need to strike fast and hard, hit them where they least expect it. The Trevani leaders sat in silence, eyes filled with fear. Their planet was dying, their people scattered, their future uncertain. The humans had arrived like a beacon of hope, but even they weren't sure how long they could hold out. You can't defeat the HFY with just a handful of ships, one of the Trevani leaders said, his voice trembling. We are too weak. There is nothing left. Elias stood up, his eyes hard with resolve. Then we'll make them see that humanity doesn't back down. We might not have your technology or your numbers, but we have something more powerful. We have heart, and we will fight to protect you, no matter the cost. The Trevani looked at each other, the weight of Elias's words sinking in. For the first time in weeks, there was a flicker of hope among them. The humans had arrived, and they had brought something the galaxy had long forgotten: courage. As the Vanguard began to circle the Trevani planet, preparing for a daring attack on the HFY ships in orbit, Elias couldn't help but think of his home. The Earth that had once been torn apart by war, yet had rebuilt itself. Humanity had known loss, but they had never given up. And now, they would show the galaxy that even in its darkest moments, humanity could rise to the challenge. The HFY didn't know it yet, but their battle with the Trevani had just become a fight against humanity, and that was a fight they would soon regret. The Trevani homeworld was a planet of beauty, a world of green fields, flowing rivers, and grand cities that had once been symbols of peace and prosperity. Now, those cities were reduced to rubble. The HFY fleets hovered in the sky, casting long shadows over the land. Their warships were massive, capable of obliterating anything in their path, and they showed no mercy. The Trevani were trapped, their cries for help ignored by the galaxy. But now, something was different. Humanity had arrived. The Vanguard, a lone ship from a distant world, floated above the broken planet, a small glimmer of hope in the vastness of space. Captain Elias Voss stood at the helm, his eyes focused on the chaos below. He knew the battle ahead would not be easy. The HFY were a fierce enemy, and they would not back down without a fight. But Elias was not a man who feared the odds. His crew gathered around him in the command center, their faces determined. Commander Sienna Graves stood at his side, reviewing the attack plan. Despite the grim situation, there was a spark of confidence in her eyes. "We've got one shot at this," she said. "The HFY are expecting us to attack head-on, but if we strike their supply lines, we can cripple their fleet from within." Elias nodded. He knew it was a risky plan, but it was the only one that had a chance of succeeding. The Vanguard had been designed for speed, not firepower. It wasn't a battleship, but it was fast and maneuverable. And with the human ingenuity on board, they might just be able to outsmart the HFY. Sienna turned to the crew, giving them the signal to begin. "All fighters, prepare for launch. We hit them hard and fast. Move quickly, hit their weak spots, and don't get caught." The fighters launched from the Vanguard like a swarm of angry hornets, racing toward the HFY blockade. The HFY ships, confident in their superiority, didn't expect such a swift attack. The human fighters darted between the larger warships, dodging fire and striking where it would hurt the most. Every blast, every strike, sent ripples through the HFY formation, leaving them confused and disorganized. On the surface of the planet, the Trevani watched in awe as the humans fought with a courage they had never seen before. They had heard the stories of humanity's past, of wars, survival, and resilience, but they had never witnessed it firsthand. The Trevani had long believed in peaceful solutions, but now they saw that sometimes, to survive, you had to fight. "Look at them," said Corin, a Trevani elder, as he watched the Vanguard and its fighters strike at the HFY fleet. "The humans, they don't fear death. They fight for others, even when the odds are impossible." Beside him, his granddaughter, Nera, nodded. "We should fight too. We can't just hide. They came to save us. We owe them our strength." Corin looked down at the young girl, her eyes full of determination. He had never seen her so sure of herself. The Trevani had always been a peaceful people, but in this moment, he saw something change in them. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could fight too. Back in the skies above, the battle raged on. The Vanguard darted around the HFY warships, striking at weak points in their defenses. Elias barked orders over the comms, his voice calm but urgent. "Target the engines, then take out their communications. We need to break their coordination." The human crew worked together like a well-oiled machine, each member contributing their expertise to the fight. The Vanguard was small, but it was quick. It danced between the HFY ships, taking advantage of every opportunity. But the enemy was relentless, and soon the Vanguard found itself surrounded. "Captain, we've got incoming," shouted a crew member. "HFY ships are closing in on us." Elias didn't hesitate. "Full speed ahead. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. They can't hit us if we don't give them a chance." The Vanguard raced forward, dodging fire and weaving through the larger HFY ships. For a moment, it felt like a game of cat and mouse. The HFY were strong, but humanity had something they didn't: creativity. With every move, Elias and his crew proved that even the smallest ship could be a force to be reckoned with. The Trevani, watching from the ground, felt their hope rise. They had always believed in the power of peace, but they had never considered that sometimes the fight for survival required a different kind of strength. And now, as the humans fought beside them, they understood. It was not the size of the army, but the heart of the fighters that mattered. As the vanguard made another daring pass through the HFY fleet, Elias's voice crackled over the comms, full of determination. This isn't over. We fight, we win, and we'll make sure the galaxy knows humanity does not back down. The Trevani, their hearts now filled with a new sense of purpose, gathered their courage. The battle for their survival had only just begun. The vanguard had made its mark. The HFY fleet, disoriented by the sudden human attack, was beginning to fall into disarray. But Elias knew it was only the beginning. The battle was far from over, and the HFY were not the type to surrender easily. The fight for the Trevani homeworld would take everything they had, and more. Status report, Elias said, his voice steady as he looked at the battle unfolding on the screens before him. He could feel the adrenaline of the crew around him, but there was no time to waste. Every second counted. We've taken down several of their smaller ships, Sienna Graves, the ship's commander, replied. But the larger warships are still intact. We've got to disable their main fleet if we want a chance at victory. Elias nodded, his mind working quickly. They had come into this battle with limited resources, but they had something the HFY didn't. A will to fight that burned brighter than any weapon. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to prevail. We need reinforcements, Elias said. We can't do this alone. Sienna looked at him, her brow furrowed. But who can we call for help? We're the only ship in the area. Elias didn't hesitate. He had made a promise to the Trevani, and he would keep it. There's a human fleet stationed near the outer rim. I'm sending out a distress signal. If they're still operational, they'll respond. As Elias sent the message, he turned to the Trevani diplomats who had been working with them. They were on the bridge, eyes wide with uncertainty. They had never seen anything like this before. The Trevani had always believed in peace, not war. Yet in their time of need, it was humanity who had come to their side. We will fight alongside you, Corin, one of the Trevani leaders, said. His voice was strong, despite the tremor of fear that still lingered in his eyes. We will not let our world fall without resistance. Elias nodded, grateful for their resolve. The humans had inspired something new in the Trevani, a courage they had never known. It was a turning point, one that would not be forgotten. Back on the ground, the Trevani had begun to rally their own forces. Though their military was small compared to the HFY, they had powerful defenses hidden beneath the surface of their planet. The humans had taught them how to fight back, how to use their own strengths to level the playing field. The Trevani's once dormant military was now awake and ready to defend their home. The vanguard wasn't the only one making moves. All across the planet, hidden bunkers opened up, releasing advanced Trevani defense systems. They were not weapons of destruction, but rather systems designed to disable the enemy's technology, an advantage humanity had helped them to see. As the Trevani forces took their positions, Elias watched from the vanguard. The HFY were regrouping, their fleet becoming more organized with each passing minute, but they were unaware of the new threat the Trevani had prepared. Human, your reinforcements have arrived, said Corin over the comms, his voice filled with both awe and gratitude. We are ready. Elias's heart raced. The reinforcements had arrived. A human fleet of 5 ships, led by Admiral Samuel Ross, was now in orbit around the Trevani homeworld. The vanguard was no longer alone in its fight. They had the support they needed to take on the HFY. We've got the firepower now, Elias said, turning to Sienna. Let's make this count. With the Trevani forces joining them, the humans launched a new offensive. The battle became fiercer, but the tide had begun to turn. The HFY warships, once confident in their numbers and strength, were now under fire from 2 sides. The human fleet, with its powerful weapons and quick maneuvers, was a force to be reckoned with. Meanwhile, the Trevani used their unique systems to disable the HFY ship's communications, throwing their coordination into chaos. In the chaos of battle, Elias and his crew worked seamlessly with the Trevani. Every attack, every move, was a calculated effort to break the HFY's hold on the planet. The Trevani were no longer spectators. They were fighters. They had embraced the fight for their survival, and now they fought with a determination they had never known. The HFY, realizing that they were losing control of the battle, began to retreat, but the human fleet and the Trevani forces didn't give them the chance. A coordinated strike from all sides left the HFY with no way out. Their once proud fleet was now in tatters, their plans shattered. Elias watched as the last of the HFY ships disappeared into the depths of space. The Trevani homeworld, though scared by battle, was safe for now. "We did it," Scifi said, her voice filled with relief. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We did it. Together." On the planet below, the Trevani cheered. They had not only survived, but they had found something even more important, a new alliance. An alliance with humanity, one built on trust, respect, and a shared will to fight for what was right. Elias turned to the crew of the Vanguard, his eyes filled with pride. "This is just the beginning. The galaxy may have abandoned them, but humanity will never turn its back on those in need." The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Elias and his crew watched from the Vanguard as the last of the HFY ships fled into the blackness of space. The Trevani homeworld was battered, but it had been saved. For the first time in what felt like years, there was a sense of hope among the Trevani people. Humanity had shown them that they were not alone, and that they could fight back when the galaxy turned its back on them. But Elias knew that this victory was only temporary. The HFY were not the type of enemy to give up easily. They would regroup, plan, and return with even more firepower. The Trevani needed more than just a moment of relief. They needed to prepare for what was to come. "Captain, the Trevani are calling for a meeting," Scifi said, her voice steady as always. "They want to discuss what comes next." Elias nodded. "We'll go. We need to be ready for their next move." The Trevani had never been a militaristic people. Their planet had been one of peace, and war was something they had only heard about in stories. But now, after their first real battle, they had seen the reality of war. They needed to learn quickly if they were going to survive the coming storm. On the surface of the planet, a large gathering of Trevani leaders awaited them. Corin, the elder who had stood by them since the beginning, greeted Elias and Sienna with a solemn expression. "We are grateful for your help, Captain," Corin said. "Without you, our world would have fallen. But now we must ask, what do we do next?" Elias looked around the room. The Trevani had gathered from all corners of their planet, and despite their obvious fear, there was a fire in their eyes. They were ready to fight for their world, even if it meant learning how to wield weapons they had never touched before. "We must prepare for the worst," Elias said, his voice filled with the same resolve that had carried him and his crew through the battle. "The HFY will not stop. They'll come back, stronger than before, but you don't have to face them alone." Sienna stepped forward. "Humanity may be a small force in this galaxy, but we have a history of overcoming impossible odds. You've seen it yourself. Together, we can defeat them." Corin's eyes brightened at her words. He had watched the humans fight with a courage that was unlike anything the Trevani had ever seen. There was something special about the humans, a strength that came not from their weapons, but from their hearts. "I see now," Corin said, his voice quiet but filled with determination. "It is not just your technology or your armies that make you strong. It is your spirit. We will fight with you, not just as allies, but as friends." Elias smiled. This was what they needed, a partnership built on trust and a shared desire to protect their home. The Trevani had the knowledge and resources to defend their planet, but humanity had the experience of surviving against impossible odds. Together, they would be unstoppable. "We'll start training your people," Elias said. "We'll teach you how to defend yourselves, how to fight back against the HFY. It won't be easy, but it's the only way we can ensure your survival." Corin nodded. "We will do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, humanity and the Trevani worked side by side. The humans shared their military strategies, their knowledge of combat, and their advanced technology. The Trevani, in turn, taught the humans about their unique defenses and how to use their planet's natural resources to their advantage. It was a partnership that grew stronger with each passing day. The Trevani, once a peaceful race, were now becoming warriors in their own right. They trained in new tactics, learning how to fight with purpose and precision. The human soldiers taught them how to use their environment to their advantage, to set traps, and to strike quickly. But even more importantly, the humans taught them how to stand tall in the face of fear. "Don't fight like you're defending your home," Sienna told a group of Trevani soldiers during one of the training sessions. "Fight like you've already won. Fight like you're protecting the future." The words resonated deeply with the Trevani. For the first time, they felt like they had a real chance at victory. They weren't just defending their home, they were fighting for their future, for their children, and for everything they had ever believed in. The training wasn't easy. The Trevani were not used to combat, and their bodies were not built for the same kind of strength that humans had. But they were resilient. They worked tirelessly, pushing their limits, determined to be ready for whatever the HFY threw at them. As the days passed, the alliance between humanity and the Trevani grew stronger. The human fleet, bolstered by the new weapons and tactics learned from the Trevani, continued to patrol the space around the planet. And though the threat of the HFY still loomed large, there was a growing sense of hope among the Trevani people. Elias stood on the vanguard, looking down at the planet below. The battle was not over, but the Trevani were no longer helpless. They had a chance, a real chance, to defend their world. And with humanity by their side, they were ready to take on whatever the galaxy threw at them. The HFY had underestimated humanity and the Trevani. Now they would pay the price for that mistake. The preparations were underway, but the atmosphere on the vanguard was tense. The alliance between humanity and the Trevani had grown stronger with each passing day. But Elias knew that their training wasn't enough to guarantee victory. The HFY were ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to use every trick in the book to wipe out their enemies. Elias stood on the bridge, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. His mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. The Trevani had shown incredible resilience, but the humans had only just begun to prepare for the real war. They couldn't afford to fail. "Captain, we've received a distress signal." Sienna's voice broke through his thoughts. "It's from a Trevani colony on the edge of their star system. They're under attack." Elias's heart sank. The first major HFY strike had arrived. They were not waiting for the Trevani to be fully prepared. They were taking advantage of the momentary weakness. Elias knew that if they didn't act quickly, the colony would be lost. "Set course for the colony," he ordered, his voice firm. "All hands, prepare for battle." The vanguard leaped into motion, its engines roaring as it accelerated toward the distant colony. Elias couldn't help but feel a knot in his stomach. He knew they were outnumbered, and the colony was not ready for a full-scale attack. But there was no time to waste. If the HFY destroyed the colony, it would send a message to the Trevani. Humanity could not protect them. The ship flew through space at full speed, the crew working in perfect harmony, preparing for a battle they were not yet fully ready for. Sienna stood at the helm, her face focused and determined. She glanced at Elias and gave him a brief nod. The humans were ready, but Elias could see the worry in her eyes. The Trevani had come so far in such a short time, but they were still learning. And the HFY were not an enemy to take lightly. The colony came into view, a beautiful, peaceful world surrounded by lush forests and clear oceans. But it was a world under siege. Sci-Fi ships, dark and menacing, hovered over the colony, launching relentless waves of missiles. The Trevani defenders, still in the early stages of their training, were scrambling to defend their homes. Their weapons fired in uneven bursts, hitting only a few of the enemy ships. The odds were not in their favor. "We'll give them a fighting chance," Elias said, his voice full of resolve. "Open fire, all weapons." The Vanguard fired its cannons, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The XL-FAR ships scattered, but they quickly regrouped. They were strong, and their firepower outmatched the human fleet. But Elias didn't flinch. He knew that they were about to make a crucial move. "We've got reinforcements on the way," Sienna said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Human ships from the nearby outposts will arrive in 15 minutes. Elias nodded, but he wasn't sure they had that long. The Trevani were struggling to defend their world, and the XL-FAR were pressing hard. Every second counted. He glanced at the main screen and saw the colony's surface begin to glow from the heat of the XL-FAR bombardment. It wouldn't be long before they destroyed everything. "Give me a firing solution on their flagship," Elias ordered. Sienna's hands flew over the controls, inputting the necessary coordinates. "Locked in." "Fire when ready," Elias said. The Vanguard's main cannon charged, its energy building up to a nearly blinding glow. With a deafening roar, the cannon fired, its shot cutting through the blackness of space, striking the XL-FAR flagship with unrelenting force. The enemy ship shuddered, its shields barely holding up as the blast slammed into its side. The XL-FAR flagship retaliated, firing a volley of missiles. The Vanguard rocked under the impact, but the shields held strong. Elias could feel the ship's power struggling, but it wasn't enough. The enemy was relentless, and they needed more than just one shot to turn the tide. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Elias said, gripping the armrest of his chair. "We can't let them get another hit in." Sienna's hands moved with quick precision, guiding the Vanguard through a series of sharp turns. The ship spun and twisted, avoiding the enemy fire. The battle was far from over, but the humans were showing their strength. Their resilience was unmatched, and they weren't about to back down. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared. One of the Sci-Fi missiles had found its target. The Vanguard rocked again, this time with a violent shudder. Elias's head snapped forward as the ship's lights flickered and the hull groaned. "We've lost power to the aft engines," Sienna reported, her voice tense but controlled. "We're drifting." "Get the engines back online," Elias ordered. "We're not losing this fight." The crew scrambled to fix the damaged systems. Elias gritted his teeth. The Trevani had been caught off guard, and now they were in danger of losing the colony. But they weren't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. "We're not alone in this," Elias whispered to himself as he gripped the console. The message was clear. Humanity was here, and they would fight for the Trevani, no matter the cost. The battle had raged for hours. The Vanguard and the other human ships were holding their ground, but it was clear that the XL-FAR weren't backing down. The sky above the Trevani colony had turned into a war zone, filled with the flashing lights of energy blasts and the haunting echoes of missiles colliding with shields. Elias stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the main screen. The Trevani forces were barely holding on. Despite the bravery of the humans and the Trevani's improved efforts, the sheer force of the XL-FAR fleet was overwhelming. Elias's grip tightened on the edge of his chair as he watched the enemy ship circle, waiting for their chance to strike. The Vanguard had suffered damage, nothing too critical, but enough to make it harder to maneuver. The systems were overloaded, and the crew was working tirelessly to keep things functioning. But even with all their preparation, it felt like they were losing. "Captain, we've got incoming," Sienna said, her voice sharp as she looked up from the navigation console. "Another wave of XL-FAR fighters. They're heading straight for us." "Damn it," Elias muttered under his breath. "Brace for impact." The next few moments were a blur. The ship lurched as enemy fighters bombarded them, and the shields flickered dangerously. The crew worked fast, but they were outnumbered. The HFY had proven to be relentless, and they showed no signs of stopping. "We're not giving up," Elias said firmly. His words were barely above a whisper, but they carried with them the weight of every battle they had fought. Humanity isn't going to be beaten today. He quickly turned to his tactical officer. "Fire everything we have. Take out those fighters." "Firing now, Captain," the officer responded. The Vanguard's weapons came alive, energy blasts streaking through space as they targeted the incoming fleet of Sci-Fi fighters. The enemy ships exploded one by one, their fiery remnants fading into the emptiness of space. The humans were managing to hold off the waves of fighters, but they needed more. "Captain, reinforcements are here," Sienna reported, her voice a little brighter now. "The second fleet is arriving." Elias exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looked at the view screen as a new fleet of human ships appeared from the shadows of the colony's moon. It was the boost they desperately needed. The enemy's fighters were scattered, and their firepower was weakening. But the HFY weren't going to go down easily. The flagship, the same massive ship that had led the attack, still hovered ominously above the colony. Its dark silhouette cast a shadow over the planet, and it was still firing relentlessly. Elias knew they had to take it out if they had any hope of winning. "Target the flagship," Elias ordered, his voice filled with determination. "All weapons on it." Sienna nodded, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. The ship's cannons powered up, and Elias could feel the tension building in the air. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The Vanguard unleashed a massive barrage, energy blasts crashing into the flagship's shields. The enemy flagship retaliated, its weapons lashing out, but the human ships had already closed the distance. The second fleet was making a direct assault, firing in perfect coordination. The flagship's shields began to crack, the barrage overwhelming its defenses. "Keep pushing," Elias said through gritted teeth. "We can do this." The Trevani, seeing the tide of battle turning, joined in the fight. Their ships, now fully ready for battle, fired alongside the humans. The combined firepower of the human fleet and the Trevani ships began to tear into the Sci-Fi flagship. It shuddered violently, its weapons systems faltering. The massive ship was losing power, and it was only a matter of time before it would fall. Sienna's voice cut through the noise on the bridge. "Captain, the flagship's shields are down. We can finish it." Elias didn't hesitate. "All weapons. Now." The Vanguard's main cannon fired again, and this time, the shot pierced through the flagship's hull. Sparks flew from the enemy ship, and an explosion erupted from within. The flagship groaned as it broke apart, its massive frame beginning to fall apart. A cheer erupted from the crew as the flagship was destroyed, but Elias didn't allow himself to celebrate yet. "Target the remaining ships. Let's finish this." The human fleet, now bolstered by the Trevani, pushed forward. They were no longer on the defensive. They were taking the fight to the enemy. One by one, the HFY ships were destroyed, their forces crumbling in the face of the united human and Trevani strength. The remaining Sci-Fi ships, realizing their defeat was inevitable, began to retreat. Elias watched as the enemy fleet scattered, no longer confident in their superiority. The battle was over. The Vanguard had won. Humanity had won. As the dust settled and the fires of war began to fade, Elias let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of the battle lift from his shoulders. The Trevani colony was safe, for now, but this was only the beginning. Elias knew that more battles lay ahead, and the war was far from over. But today, humanity had made its mark. "Victory is ours," Elias said quietly, his eyes focused on the peaceful world below, "and we'll fight to protect it." The aftermath of the battle was overwhelming. The human fleet, along with the Trevani forces, had won, but the cost was clear. The once peaceful Trevani colony had been scared by the conflict. The skies, once clear and bright, were now filled with the remnants of destroyed ships and burning debris. Yet there was a feeling of relief among the human and Trevani forces. They had fought side by side and triumphed together. Elias stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring out into the void. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. He knew that the HFY would return. This victory had only delayed their inevitable next move. The human and Trevani alliance was still fragile, and they had to rebuild the trust that had been damaged by years of isolation and conflict. "Captain," Sienna said as she approached him, "the colony leaders want to meet with you. They've requested a debrief on what happens next." Elias nodded, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "Of course. Tell them I'll be there shortly." Sienna hesitated for a moment, watching him. "We did it, Elias. We actually did it. The HFY are beaten." Elias turned to her, a small, tired smile crossing his face. "We did, but the fight isn't over. The galaxy won't stop until they're sure humanity can't protect itself. We need to be ready." As they made their way to the meeting room, Elias's mind raced. The HFY had been a formidable enemy, but they had learned something important. Humanity was capable of far more than they had realized. The victory today had shown the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. It wasn't just about firepower. It was about strategy, resilience, and unity. The Trevani and humans had worked together, forming a bond that no one had anticipated, and it was that bond that had led to the defeat of the HFY. The meeting room was filled with Trevani leaders, their regal forms standing tall and proud. They had suffered losses in the battle, but their faces were filled with hope. They were now looking to humanity for guidance, and Elias knew that their alliance would be the key to securing peace. As Elias entered, he was met with respectful nods. The leader of the Trevani, a tall and dignified female named Nelia, stepped forward. "Captain Elias, we are grateful for your bravery and the strength of your people," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Without your help, we would not be standing here today." Elias gave a small bow. "It was a joint effort, Nelia. Humanity and the Trevani, together. We couldn't have done it without you." The room fell silent for a moment before Nelia spoke again. "We have much to discuss. The HFY may have retreated, but they will not forget this defeat. We must prepare for what's next." Elias took a deep breath. "You're right. The alliance between our people is still young, but it is strong. We've learned something today. Together, we are stronger than we ever thought possible." A low murmur of agreement ran through the room. The Trevani had once seen humans as weak, but now they understood the depth of their resolve. Elias could see it in their eyes. They were ready to stand side by side, no longer as separate factions, but as one force. "The war isn't over," Elias continued, "but I believe we've proven that humanity and the Trevani can stand together. We can protect each other. We can fight together. And we will." Nelia nodded. "We will. But first, we must rebuild. We must restore our homes, our people, and our way of life. The HFY may have taken much from us, but they have not taken our hope." Elias smiled. It was a small smile, but it was filled with confidence. "We'll help you rebuild. Humanity will stand by you. We owe it to you." As the meeting continued, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The journey ahead would not be easy. There were challenges to face, enemies to defeat, and scars to heal. But for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy, and with the Trevani by their side, they had the strength to face whatever came next. The battle had been won, but this was just the beginning. The galaxy would change, and humanity would be there, ready to protect their future. As Elias walked out of the room, he turned to look at the stars beyond the Vanguard's viewports. The darkness of space stretched out before him, filled with uncertainty, but also with infinite possibilities. Humanity had made its mark, and this was just the beginning of their journey. Together, they would face whatever the galaxy had in store.